The signal. The night was calm on Earth's central communication hub. Satellites floated in perfect silence above the blue planet. Operators worked quietly, scanning frequencies, checking data, and watching for any strange movement in space. It was routine, almost boring, until one moment changed everything. A loud tone broke the calm. One of the junior operators jumped, his eyes wide as a line of unknown code filled his screen. He called for his supervisor, his voice shaking. At first, they thought it was just noise, some interference from deep space, but the signal repeated clear and sharp. It was not random, it was a message. The hub's director entered the room, his face stern. He ordered the signal to be decoded and broadcast. To the entire Council of Earth, technicians worked quickly, fingers racing across consoles. The message unfolded on the big screen. It was not human. The words were strange, twisted but still understandable, and it carried a single purpose: to threaten humans. "You are weak," the alien voice boomed through speakers. "Your colonies will fall. Your fleets are dust. Your people will kneel." On the screen appeared images of human outposts burned and broken, bodies floating in space, ships torn apart. The operators froze in horror. Some could not even breathe. The signal showed destruction that had already happened. This was not a warning, it was proof. The hub director clenched his fists. He had seen war before. He had seen battles lost and won. But this was different. This was an open insult, a challenge thrown directly at humanity. And it was broadcast not only to Earth but across all human colonies. Every man, woman, and child saw the same images, heard the same mocking voice. The galaxy was watching. The aliens wanted to break humanity's spirit. Instead, they had lit a fire. On Mars, miners stopped their drills and stared at the sky. On Titan, workers in thick suits paused their heavy machines. On far colonies where life was already hard, the people gathered around screens. Fear filled the air. But it was mixed with something else, something deep, old, and dangerous: wrath. In a small home on Luna, a child turned to his father, his eyes wet. "Why are they hurting us, Papa?" he asked. The father had no answer, only silence. But in his silence was a promise. Humanity would not forgive. Humanity would not forget. Back on Earth, the Council of Nations was called into an emergency session. Leaders from every colony appeared on the giant hollow screens. Some shouted that they must surrender, that the enemy was too powerful. Others demanded war, their voices filled with rage. The chamber shook with argument, each word louder than the last. But beyond politics, beyond fear, the people had already chosen, in the streets of New York, Paris, and Beijing, in the domes of Mars, in the tunnels of Europa. People gathered. They shouted. They cried. They burned alien symbols. The signal had not broken them. It had united them. In the military halls of Earth, admirals and generals watched the broadcast again and again. They studied the images, not with fear, but with cold determination. They whispered to each other, "If they want war, then war is what they will get." One young officer stood apart, his eyes locked on the alien words still glowing on the screen. He thought of his brother, lost on a colony, ship years ago. He thought of the families watching now, afraid. He thought of what it meant to be human, and his heart burned with a single truth. Humanity had been insulted, mocked, and wounded, but humanity had also been awakened. Outside, the night sky glittered, with stars among them burned the worlds of the enemy. Far away, waiting. The signal echoed again, repeating its message across space. But now, every time it played, it did not bring fear. It brought anger. It brought resolve. The aliens had made one mistake. They believed humans would bow. They did not understand. When humanity is pushed, when humanity is insulted, humanity does not kneel. Humanity stands. And when humanity stands, it does so with wrath. The hub director finally spoke to his team, his voice steady. "Send the signal to every fleet, every base, every leader," he said. "Let them all see what has been done." His eyes narrowed as the alien words repeated, "And let them all remember, This is the day humanity's wrath was born. The operators nodded, their fear gone, replaced with grim purpose. The message had reached its target, not just their ears, not just their minds, but their hearts. The signal had awoken something the galaxy had long forgotten. The signal had awoken humanity, the debate. The council chamber was filled with voices, screens lit up with the faces of leaders from Earth, Mars, Titan, and the far colonies. The signal had shaken them all, and now every voice demanded to be heard. Fear and anger mixed in the air like fire and smoke. At the center of the chamber stood the Speaker of Earth. He raised his hand, trying to calm the storm of arguments, but his voice was drowned by the roar of different opinions. Some shouted that the aliens were too strong. They had already destroyed outposts. They had fleets larger than anything humanity could build in years. Better to surrender now than to be wiped out. One governor cried, his face pale. We must protect our people, not drag them into a war we cannot win. Others slammed their fists on the table, their anger burning hotter than their fear. A general from Mars, scarred from old battles, leaned forward into the screen, his voice cut through the noise. If we surrender, our children will live as slaves, he said. Do you want that? Do you want your families kneeling before aliens who mock us? Silence fell for a moment, the words too heavy to ignore. The speaker turned to the military advisors. What are our chances? He asked. An old admiral stepped forward, her uniform worn with age. She looked at the hologram of the alien signal replaying above them. Our chances depend on one thing, she said, her voice steady. Do we fight as divided worlds, or do we fight as one humanity? The chamber grew still. Her words touched a deep truth. For centuries, Earth and the colonies had fought with each other, arguing over resources, politics, and pride. But now, an enemy outside the human race had united them in a way nothing else ever could. A scientist from Europa spoke next, his voice trembling but his eyes sharp. These aliens believe they know us, he said. They believe humans break under fear, that we surrender when pushed. He paused, then shook his head. They have made a mistake. They do not understand what happens when humanity is insulted, when we are cornered, when we are mocked. His words were simple, but they carried weight. One by one, leaders began to speak. Some still fearful, but others stronger. Voices rose. We must defend ourselves. We cannot let this stand. If we bow now, we are finished forever. The chamber echoed with the rising storm of human determination. But then, a new voice cut through the noise, calm and clear. It was Admiral Kalen, commander of Earth's Central Fleet. He stood tall, his eyes like steel. I lost a son on an outpost destroyed by these aliens, he said, his tone quiet but heavy. They did not even bury the bodies. They left them drifting as trophies. He looked around the chamber at every leader, every soldier, every citizen watching through broadcast. I will not forgive, I will not surrender, and I will not stop until they regret ever sending that signal. The silence that followed was different this time. It was not fear, it was not confusion, it was the silence of a choice being made. The speaker finally raised his hand again, and this time the chamber listened. The question is simple, he said. Do we kneel or do we stand? One by one, voices answered, at first scattered, then together, louder, stronger. We stand. The chamber shook with the force of it. From Earth to Mars, from Titan to Europa, the words spread like fire. Every colony repeated the same cry. We stand. The decision was made. There would be no surrender. There would be no retreat. Humanity would answer the signal not with silence, not with fear, but with war. Outside the chamber, in the streets of every city, the news spread like lightning. Crowds erupted into chants, fists raised high. For the first time in history, Earth and her scattered children were truly united, not by trade, not by politics, but by wrath. Admiral Kalen left the chamber and walked into the command center. Hollow screens glowed with maps of human fleets, old warships stored in shipyards, factories waiting for orders. He turned to his officers. Send the call, he said. Awaken the fleet. And with those words, The course of humanity changed, forever. The debate was over, the decision made. The galaxy would soon learn what happens when humanity is insulted. The signal had not broken them. The signal had forged them into something far more dangerous. One people, one purpose, one wrath. Awakening the fleet. The order spread like thunder across the colonies. Every shipyard, every base, every hidden hangar came alive. For years, humanity had been told that war was behind them, that peace was the only future worth building. Old warships had been locked away, stripped of weapons, left to rust in silent docks. But now, one signal had changed everything. The fleet was no longer sleeping. It was waking. On Earth, the Atlantic shipyard trembled with new life. Giant cranes moved across steel frames. Sparks flew as welders reforged armor plates. Rows of ancient cruisers, silent for decades, groaned as engines roared again. The sound was not just metal. It was the heartbeat of wrath. Men and women in uniforms worked side by side with engineers and civilians. They did not complain of long hours or danger. They worked because they all remembered the signal. They worked because anger was stronger than exhaustion. On Mars, the dust fields near Olympus Mons were lit with fire. Shipbuilders tore apart mining rigs and remade them into weapons. Children carried food to workers. Doctors set up tents near the yards. Even those too old to fight came to help. Every hand mattered. Every effort counted. The spirit of war was not only in soldiers, it was in the people themselves. In the icy tunnels of Europa, secret hangars opened for the first time in generations. There slept the dreadnought Iron Resolve, a ship whispered about in old war stories. Its hull was scarred, its cannons silent, its decks covered in frost. But when engineers walked through the cold halls and switched on the power, lights flickered to life. The ancient beast was awake again, and its awakening sent chills across the galaxy. Admiral Kalen walked the decks of the flagship Vanguard. Everywhere he went, soldiers saluted, their faces hard and ready. He looked at the young recruits, many barely out of training. Their hands shook as they held rifles, but their eyes burned with determination. They were not fighting for glory, not for conquest. They were fighting because someone had mocked their families, their homes, their humanity itself. Kalen nodded to them, his voice calm but sharp. "You are the shield of Earth, and now you will be its sword," he said. "They thought we would bow, but we will rise, and when we rise, the stars will tremble." News of the awakening spread beyond human space. Alien merchants whispered in shadowed markets. Scouts from rival empires sent urgent messages. The galaxy had always seen humans as young, divided, still learning their place among the stars, but now they saw something new. They saw fire, they saw unity, they saw wrath. Back on Earth, in a hidden bunker, scientists worked on projects locked away for decades. Experimental weapons, abandoned after peace treaties, were pulled out of vaults. Energy cannons that could pierce planets, stealth drives that could cloak entire fleets. The aliens who sent the signal had no idea what humanity had been hiding. They believed they had struck a weak species, but they had struck a species that had learned, that had prepared, that had been waiting. Children in schools painted pictures of warships with fire behind them. Farmers on distant colonies sent food shipments without being asked. Even prisoners were offered choices: work for the fleet and earn freedom. Everyone had a role. It was no longer just a military fight. It was a human fight. The wrath belonged to all of them. One night, as the Vanguard prepared to launch, Admiral Kalen stood on the command deck staring at the stars. He remembered his son, his voice, his laughter, his dreams. The signal had stolen that from him and from thousands of others. His hands tightened behind his back. "This is not just war," he whispered. "This is vengeance." All across the colonies, ships lifted into the sky, engines blazing, the stars lit with the fire of awakening fleets. Families watched from the ground, waving to fathers, mothers, daughters, and sons. Tears fell, but no one begged them to stay. They all knew this was the price of wrath. They all knew the signal had changed their destiny. And as the fleets gathered, as war banners rose again after centuries of silence, the galaxy watched in fear. Because for the first time, humanity was not fighting each other. They were fighting together. And when humanity fights together, there is no enemy in the universe that can stand for long. The fleet was awake. The war had begun. First blood. The fleet did not wait long for its first mission. Scouts traced the alien signal back to a red star at the edge of human space, orbiting. That star was a massive station, bristling with weapons, its black hull glowing with strange alien symbols. It was the nest where the message had been born. And it was the perfect target. Admiral Kalen stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, his eyes locked on the tactical display. Around him floated destroyers, frigates, and heavy cruisers, their hulls still scarred from hasty repairs. They were not perfect ships, but they carried perfect purpose. The time had come to answer the signal, not with words, but with fire. The order was given, engines roared, shields flared to life, and the human fleet charged. The silence of space broke as cannons opened, blue streaks of plasma racing across the void. The alien station reacted with deadly speed, launching swarms of needle-like fighters that darted like shadows. Explosions lit the black sky, turning the battlefield into a storm of fire and debris. On the Resolute, a young pilot named Carter gritted his teeth as alien fighters swarmed his squadron. His hands shook on the controls, but his heart was steady. "This is for my brother," he whispered, and pressed the trigger. A burst of missiles cut through the swarm, shredding the enemy ships into burning fragments. All across the battle line, human voices echoed with the same vow. This was not just combat. This was vengeance. The station unleashed a beam of crimson light, carving through one of the human destroyers. The ship split apart, its crew lost to the cold of space. But instead of breaking morale, the sight only fueled the wrath of the fleet. Soldiers shouted through comms, promising revenge. Every ship fought harder, fiercer, as if the blood of their comrades was fire in their veins. Inside the alien station, commanders sneered. They had seen humans before, desperate and fragile. But now, for the first time, they felt unease. The humans were not retreating. They were not breaking. They were pressing forward, even as their ships burned. It was madness, and it was terrifying. The Vanguard closed in, its cannons thundering. Kalen raised his hand, his voice steady as stone. "Target the heart," he commanded. Dozens of human ships aligned, their weapons glowing, bright. Together, they unleashed a storm that tore through the alien shields. The station shook, fire spilling from its core. The enemy scrambled, but it was too late. The humans had found their mark. As the alien station began to collapse, Admiral Kalen gave no smile. This victory was not joy. It was justice. The Vanguard fired one final salvo, piercing the heart of the station. The explosion lit the star system, a sun within a sun. For a moment, space itself seemed to tremble. The station was gone, erased. The first blood had been drawn. On human worlds, news of the battle spread faster than light. Crowds filled the streets cheering, crying, shouting the names of ships and heroes. For the first time since the signal, they felt hope. The aliens could bleed, their fortresses could fall, and if one could be destroyed, so could more. But Kalen knew the truth. The destruction of the station was not an ending, it was a beginning. As wreckage floated across the void, human scouts picked up transmissions. More fleets, more stations, more enemies were on the move. The signal had not been the voice of one station, it had been the voice of an empire, and that empire was coming. On the bridge of the Vanguard, silence hung heavy after the explosion. The crew looked to Kalen, their faces fierce but tired. He spoke quietly, yet his words carried through every channel. "We have shown them we are not afraid," he said. "But this is only the first drop of blood. The war has only begun." Far away, in hidden halls of the alien empire, leaders received the news. The humans had destroyed their outpost. At first they laughed, calling it luck. But then they replayed the recordings, the madness in the humans' charge, the way they fought even when burning, and the laughter died. For the first time, the empire felt something it had never felt before. Fear. The humans had awakened, and their wrath was only beginning. The enemy revealed. The flames of the destroyed station still drifted across the red star system, broken metal, shattered fighters, and lifeless bodies spun slowly in the cold void. But humanity's victory was only the beginning. For hidden within, the wreckage was a secret far greater than anyone had expected. The Vanguard scouts combed through the debris, searching for survivors, for codes, for anything that could tell them who their enemy truly was. In the ruins of the station's data core, engineers found encrypted transmissions still flickering. The symbols were strange, jagged and sharp, carved with arrogance. It took hours, but finally the meaning became clear. The enemy was not a pirate band, not a scattered group of raiders. It was an empire, vast and ancient, known as the Zyrath Dominion, an empire that stretched across hundreds of systems, with fleets that had crushed dozens of species before. To them, humanity was only the next target, another lesser race to be broken. The signal had not been a warning, it had been a declaration. The Dominion had marked humanity for conquest. On the Vanguard's bridge, Admiral Kalen listened as the decoded words echoed through the chamber. "You are insects," the alien voice hissed. "You crawl among the stars thinking yourselves strong, but you are nothing. We have destroyed greater civilizations than yours, and we will destroy you." The crew stared at the projection, their anger boiling. Kalen's fists tightened behind his back, his voice a low growl. "They see us as insects," he said. "Then let us show them what happens when insects bite." Across the colonies, news of the Dominion spread. People whispered the name with fear, for many had heard stories of species that vanished without a trace. Now they knew the truth. The same hand that had erased others was reaching for them. But instead of breaking, the people grew harder. Fear turned to steel, grief turned to fire, and vengeance burned brighter than ever. The Council of Nations gathered once again. This time there was no shouting, no confusion. They all knew what was at stake. A governor from Titan spoke, his voice steady. "If we do not fight, we will share the fate of the forgotten races," he said. A scientist from Europa added, "If we fight, we may fall, but if we surrender, we are already dead." The chamber fell silent. The decision no longer a debate, but a destiny. In secret corners of the galaxy, other species watched. Some pitied humanity, believing they would be crushed. Others watched with hidden hope, for no one had ever resisted the Dominion for long. And now a young, furious species was daring to stand. Admiral Kalen knew what must be done. He called his commanders to the war table. Maps of enemy systems glowed in red, each one a stronghold of the Dominion. "Their empire is vast. Their fleets are many," Kalen said. "But their pride blinds them. They think we are weak. We will use that. We will strike where they least expect, and we will show them our wrath." The first targets were chosen. Supply depots, border, garrisons, communication relays. Human fleets would spread like fire, fast and merciless. The Dominion would believe they were being bitten by shadows. Until the true strike came. On the training decks of the Vanguard, young soldiers sharpened their blades and polished their rifles. Some were afraid, but none stepped back. A pilot whispered to his squad. "They call us insects," he said with a bitter smile. "Then we will swarm, and they will choke on us." The others laughed, not with joy, but with fury. Fury was there, weapon now in the alien capital deep within the Dominion's throne world. The overlord of Zyrath sat upon his seat of crystal and bone. When the news of the destroyed station reached him, he did not flinch. Instead, he smiled. "Let the humans scream," he said. "Let them fight. Their struggle will amuse us before their end." His council laughed with him, blind to the truth that was coming. Back on Earth, families watched their loved ones march to ships. Mothers hugged sons, fathers held daughters, children clung to uniforms. Tears fell, but behind every tear was a fire that matched the stars. The Dominion had awakened something they could not kill, humanity's wrath. As fleets departed, Kalen spoke once more to his people. His voice carried across every screen. "The enemy believes they are gods," he said. "They believe we are nothing, but they are wrong. We are humanity. We endure. We fight. We rise. And from this day, the Dominion will learn the cost of awakening us." The cheers of billions answered him. The signal that had once spread fear was now buried beneath a new roar. The roar of a species united. The roar of war. Fire across the stars. The first battle had been won, But it was only the spark. Now the flames of war spread across the galaxy. Human fleets no longer waited in defense. They struck first, swift and merciless. Every star system that bore the mark of the Dominion felt the sting of humanity's wrath. At the edge of Orion's reach, a supply convoy of the Dominion floated with quiet confidence. They had no fear, for who would dare attack the Empire's ships? But when the human fleet emerged from the dark, the silence turned to screams. Frigates tore through escorts. Fighters swarmed the convoy like angry wasps. The Dominion's banners burned in the black of space, and for the first time their ships fled. News of the attack spread faster than light. The galaxy whispered, "The humans are not hiding, they are hunting." In secret halls, old races listened, their hearts stirring with something they had forgotten. Hope on Mars. Factory fires burned night and day. War machines rolled out by the thousands, each stamped with the sigil of Earth. Children watched the skies as fleets lifted, their engines like thunder, and they shouted the names of ships like heroes. Every colony gave what it could: steel, food, soldiers, blood. The war was no longer distant. It was in the bones of every human alive. On the vanguard, Admiral Kalen stood before his commanders. Maps glowed with red Dominion systems. They were being hit one by one. But Kalen knew this was only the beginning. "They believe we are shadows," he said. "Let them believe it. Let them see fire in every corner until they cannot sleep." His words were simple, but the fire in his voice carried into every fleet, and the fleets obeyed. At the Dominion border world of Selrak, the skies turned to war. The planet's defenses had stood for centuries, unbroken, but humanity came not with fear, but with fury. Frigates weaved through planetary cannons, bombers rained destruction on strongholds. The Dominion commanders screamed orders, but their soldiers trembled. The humans did not fight like other races. They did not retreat. They did not pause. They fought as if every bullet was personal. Every strike a promise of vengeance, and Selrak fell. Back on Earth, the broadcasts rolled across every screen. Images of Dominion ships burning, of human soldiers raising their flags on alien soil. The people wept and cheered, their sorrow mixing. With pride, the enemy who had called them insects was bleeding, and humanity's roar grew louder. But the Dominion was vast, and its pride was deep. In their capital, the overlord of Zyrath slammed his clawed hand upon his throne. "The humans spread like fire," he hissed. "They dare strike us. They dare burn our worlds." His council bowed in silence, none brave enough to speak, for even they had seen the recordings, the madness in human eyes, the way they fought with no fear of death. The overlord's gaze burned with rage. "Then we will drown them," he said. "Send the Grand Fleet. Let the stars turn red with their ashes." Across human space, scouts reported massive Dominion fleets gathering, armadas larger than anything humanity had ever faced. The Council of Nations trembled at the news, but Kalen did not flinch. He stood before them, calm as stone. "They believe numbers will break us," he said, "but they do not understand. Numbers cannot kill fury. They cannot kill wrath." On the frontier world of Halion, a young soldier named Mara stood with her unit. She had never left her colony before. Now she carried a rifle heavier than her arms could bear. But when she thought of the signal, when she thought of the mocking alien voice, her fear burned away. She whispered to herself, "We are not insects, we are human." And with that she stepped onto the dropship, ready to fight. Humanity's fleets spread fire across the stars. Every Dominion world they struck became a scar. Every battle was a message. You called us weak, you called us insects. Now you will learn our true name: Wrath. The galaxy trembled, not because of the size of human fleets, not because of their weapons, but because of their will. A will that did not bend, a will that did not break, a will that turned pain into fire, and as the flames spread, even the stars themselves seemed to whisper, humanity had awoken, and there was no turning back. Wrath unleashed. The stars burned with war, but one system shone brighter than all: the Dominion's throne world, Zereth Prime, a jewel of black towers and crimson skies, the heart of the Empire. It was said no fleet could reach it, no enemy could touch it. For centuries the Dominion had ruled from this world, unchallenged, unbroken. But now humanity was coming. From every colony, from every shipyard, from every outpost, the fleets of Earth gathered, cruisers, frigates, dreadnoughts, carriers, the greatest armada humanity had ever forged, engines, lit the void like 1,000 suns. Banners of Earth and Mars and Titan flew together. For once the scattered children of humanity were not divided. They were one people, one will, one wrath. On the vanguard, Admiral Kalen stood before his crew. He looked at their faces, young and old, scarred and untested. He saw fear in their eyes, but it was not fear of death. It was fear of failing those who had fallen before. He raised his hand and spoke, his voice steady as iron. "This is the end of their empire," he said. "This is the day they learn who we are. We are not insects, we are not weak. We are humanity. And today we will make the stars remember our name." The order was given, and the human fleet surged toward Xyrath Prime. The Dominion's grand fleet awaited, stretching across the system. Like a wall of steel, thousands of warships, countless fighters, titanic dreadnoughts that dwarfed cities. The Overlord himself watched from his throne, certain that the humans would break. But as the two fleets clashed, the galaxy trembled, the sky turned into fire. Cannons roared, missiles streaked, beams of light split the darkness. Human ships tore into enemy lines with reckless fury. They fought as if every ship carried the weight of the fallen, as if every bullet was a scream of vengeance. Dominion fleets pressed hard, their numbers overwhelming. Human cruisers fell, frigates shattered, carriers burned. But even as ships died, the humans pushed forward. Every loss only sharpened their rage. In the thick of the battle, the dreadnought Iron Resolve carved a path through the Dominion lines. Its cannons thundered like gods, its hull glowing with fire. The enemy swarmed it, but the old warship would not fall. Its captain shouted over comms, "For Earth, for Mars, for every world they burned." And the ship rammed into a Dominion cruiser, tearing it apart in a blaze of sacrifice. The explosion shook the field, and the humans roared louder. On the Dominion throne, the Overlord watched in disbelief. His fleets were larger, his weapons stronger, yet the humans would not stop. "They fight like madmen," he hissed. "They fight as if death itself is their ally." For the first time in his long reign, he felt the taste of fear. The vanguard pressed forward, its cannons locked on the heart of Xyrath Prime. Kalen stood tall, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Target the capital," he said. The fleet obeyed, unleashing every weapon, every missile, every beam. The skies above the throne world turned white with fire. The great towers crumbled. The black banners burned. The Dominion, once unshaken, was falling. On the ground, alien soldiers fled as human forces landed. Marines stormed fortresses, raising human flags on alien soil. Civilians of conquered races watched from the shadows, their eyes wide with awe. The empire that had enslaved them for centuries was breaking, and it was breaking under the wrath of humanity. The Overlord, proud and cruel, refused to flee. He stood in his shattered throne hall as the vanguard's cannons fired. The palace exploded in flames, his empire ending in a single blaze, and with that the Dominion was no more. When the fires dimmed, silence spread across the galaxy. The humans had done the impossible. They had taken first blood. They had spread fire across the stars. And now they had brought down an empire. Back on Earth, billions watched the broadcast. Families wept, not only for victory, but for the countless lives lost to buy it. But they also stood tall, proud of what they had become. They had been mocked, insulted, called insects. Now they were something greater. Now they were wrath itself, Admiral. Kalen stood once more on the bridge, his eyes on the stars. His voice was quiet, but it carried through every surviving ship. "The signal was meant to break us," he said, "but it made us stronger. The galaxy will never forget what began that day. The day humanity's wrath was unleashed, and across the stars, every voice, every world, every survivor whispered the same word: humanity.